Saying chill out, it's just a joke to an autistic person could mean, at best, little to fuck all to them if they failed to detect your irony, sarcasm, banterous remark, or deadpan delivery, due to the fact their sense of humour and methods of communication and social interaction are different to yours. They may simply shrug it off, carry on with their life, and not feel in the least scarred by this experience. At worst, these words, when conveyed to an autistic person, and being part of a banter situation in general, could engender an unimaginable amount of fear or dread and trigger some very unpleasant memories. Why? Because first we have to consider how much people enjoy making jokes about each other or bantering with one another, and just how many social situations rely upon this method of communication. The camaraderie within many circles and groups is defined and fueled by banter and reciprocal humour. Many of us enjoy a good laugh with our friends, sometimes at each other's expense. And I am no different. Okay, so then we must consider that an autistic person could have spent their entire life as the butt of other people's jokes, as often as any person, yet their experience could be one of distress, confusion, and a sense of false inclusion, a term I have made up to describe how trying to include an autistic person using neurotypical methods is still excluding them, and therefore failing to meet their needs or acknowledge the autistic person for who they are at their core. Due to the autistic person's communication and social interaction differences, other people may get a kick out of their unusual responses to banter, such that they are targeted more often. Imagine how often the autistic person is the recipient of these phrases when they either don't respond to the gentle ribbings of their bantering peers, or do retort, but not to the implicit received social standard they are expected to uphold. What is wrong with you? You're so weird and awkward. Do you not have a sense of humour or something? You're boring. Be funnier. I love winding you up because you never react. You just take it. And of course, chill out, it's just a joke. Or perhaps they are egged on by onlookers and buckle further under the ever-increasing undue pressure. Go on, don't just stand there and say nothing. Give them a bit of banter back. So, as I previously stated, we must first consider how valuable banter is as a social currency to a lot of people, and how frequently people call upon it as a viable method of communication. Then it is important to consider how difficult it might be for an autistic or other neurodivergent individuals to process, understand, and effectively reciprocate banter, and how, after years of not applying what other people regard as the correct responses, these situations become utterly traumatic to the autistic person. People often proceed to make an autistic person feel bad after their joke was not well received by them. Failed attempts at humour can be difficult for many to bear, but perhaps what they don't consider is that the autistic person to whom they are making a joke isn't only incapable of making a joke in a neurotypical fashion due to their communication and social interaction differences, but are reminded daily of their permanent failures in said situations, and because of which feel unfunny, socially inutile, insecure and worthless. Thus, being a part of an ordinary banter situation, which many people view as harmless, enjoyable or inclusive, is seen as the total opposite to many autistic people, who, in these situations, feel like broken second-rate versions of normal people. I'm not saying that autistic people are unfunny, have no sense of humour or lack wit. In fact, personally speaking, the funniest people I know are neurodivergent. My funniest autistic friends have such a unique, out-of-the-box and abstract way of analysing certain situations for purposes of humour. Interestingly, the autistic style of humour is often lost on the neurotypical person, which is reminiscent of how communication is a two-way street. Check out the double empathy problem theorised by Dr. Damien Milton, autistic academic. Autistic humour isn't lesser than neurotypical humour, it's just different. Though, if I'm being truthful, or biased, I much prefer autistic humour. I find it more interesting and even inventive and original in many cases. The bizarre, detailed observations and fearlessness in delivery are music to my ears. Many autistic people are able to banter and joke in a way as to be amusing by neurotypical standards too. As a child, I gained a reputation among my neurotypical milieu as a class clown quite early on, but this was by no means without its difficulties, and I was by no means without my disadvantages. I never understood the social boundaries most people seem to take for granted. I failed to detect that fine line between saying something mildly inappropriate, yet funny and acceptable, and just plain wrong, and therefore socially unacceptable. Sometimes I would respond correctly, whilst other times I wouldn't. My aim was faulty, and I felt like a blindfolded archer. It was confusing, and more than distressing, as time and time again each social experience served as a stark reminder of what I believed was my inherent wrongness or faultiness as a person. If someone made a light-hearted gag at me, my ripostes, by other people's standards, could have been mean, extreme, over-the-top, vulgar, and would have either got me into trouble or caused other people to dislike me or avoid me. I would also often mistake what other people were saying, remarks intended to be jokes, as personal attacks and would become defensive and proceed to verbally eviscerate them in return. Due to the fact I saw their remarks as attacks and not jokes, I would feel justified in my insulting them. The reactions each time would be fairly consistent. "You take things way too seriously, Harry," or of course, "Chill out, it's only a joke." Comments which were intended to help me, educate me or reassure me, but after years of having people tell me the same thing again and again about how my responses to jokes were getting it wrong, I began to view these situations as terrifying. I carefully examined NT-joke situations in my head. I could make people laugh by being witty, flamboyant, outrageous and peculiar, and I could employ sarcasm, though I wasn't always great at receiving it. But what was it about certain joke situations that I kept getting wrong? I realised that people weren't supposed to take things too seriously, and that there was such a thing as overdoing the retort to the point of hurting someone, even though I was getting hurt too. Not that that was a concern to the people in my life, because of course I was the one failing to achieve banter etiquette. So at one point in my childhood I decided to not say anything in these situations, to merely laugh, or fake laugh, seeing as I often didn't find people's jokes funny, and just wait for the tortuous moment to end. I thought that if I laughed, then I wouldn't be accused of being defensive or taking myself too seriously. But alas, even this wasn't acceptable. No, I would then be told by onlookers, "Don't let them get away with that," or to give banter back. And then I would freeze. Extreme demand avoidance sets in for me here, when people are expecting or demanding at least some kind of response. At this point, I felt incapacitated and humiliated in every sense of the word. I realised that often my only options were to not say anything, or when I did say something, it would be so over the top and too outrageous for many people to handle. Either way, in other people's eyes, I would always get it wrong, regardless of what my response would be. That middle ground between saying or doing nothing and saying or doing too much seemed beyond my reach, and because of which I felt defective. The fact that I was still seen as a funny child by people, despite my difficulties in ascertaining that boundary between mildly inappropriate and plain wrong, just added to the confusion and uncertainty.